Good morning. I have always said that it's not the first sermon that you give or the last sermon that tells the people or church who you are, but it's actually your life. And it's really, I feel, what goes in between the first and last sermon. Is that right? For all the last 6 years, if you have to wait till the last sermon, it's too late. And so I wanted to kind of give you a challenge, not only for the foundation that we have built, but also for where we're going. And you said, we're not going anywhere. Oh, yes, you are. If you don't go anywhere, then my ministry has been a failure. Is that true? If you just say, we're just giving up, then my ministry has been completely a failure. I finally got my voice. Hello. Come on. I wanted to give you just a few things that I felt are important to tell you before I leave. The first is that I am extremely grateful. You have embraced me. You have gone with me with some of these crazy ideas. And some of you, as I mentioned in the first service, when I thought, oh my goodness, they want me to go to Falls City filled with druggies and all these weird people. And it has been a blessing. And then when I came here and I said, oh my goodness, Presbyterian? You want me to be a pastor for Presbyterians and Methodists? And we both entered that whole meeting thinking, oh, he's a Baptist. Can anything good come from Baptist? And then Kate Conley said something happened in that meeting where it was a Jesus moment. And it was, where we came and agreed, said, this might work. Not only do we accept you as a Baptist, but we're going to accept that strange little community over there, Falls City, and we're going to work this thing together, making a full-time pastor out of you. I thought, how is this going to work? And God says, leave it to me. It's going to work. And it did it not? So I just wanted to say thank you for blessing me, because you have seen me grow as I have seen you grow. There are some of you that couldn't even pray publicly that now pray publicly. There are some of you that weren't even members here before. And that really means a lot to me. Now, when I talk about ministry and missions, you usually think, well, that's what missionaries do, and that's what the pastor does. But I think it's very important for you to realize that ministry and missions have a whole completely new, and I think more energized kind of meaning, because I see ministry and missions speaking about things that you do on a regular basis. I see ministry really meaning loving connections. Is that right? Where you see somebody and you connect with them in a loving way. I see ministry and missions also speaking to being need-first ambassadors. If someone has a need, you provide for that need, do you not? You become ambassadors for God. You are actually God's or Christ's work inside the world. And someone is crying, you are Christ to comfort that person. If someone is in jail, you go and you visit them. If there's a widow, if there's an orphan, is that not what ministry and missions is about? Yes. Second thing I think is very important, that we've always said children are our future, and I would say wrong. Children are our present. Children are very important about who we are and how we live. Now, I've learned something very interesting over the last 2 weeks, and that being the fact that some of you I know are grandparents and great-grandparents. Is that right? Any of you that have a granddaughter or great-granddaughter or grandson, raise your hand, please. Look around the room. It's a fact that over the last 2.5 generations, we have lost our youth. But there's one thing that children hate, and that is their parents, especially in teen years. And there's something that children always love, and it's their grandparents. Is that right? Do you realize that we have an influence upon our grandchildren and great-grandchildren? Do we not? And there might be something, Grandmother, why do we do that? I don't understand. Well, you know we do that because God loves us, and this is what we do at church, and this is an amazing thing, this thing called love and spirit. Okay, I'll think about that. We can have a great influence upon our grandchildren and great-grandchildren, can we not? In fact, we can be the vitalization within this whole generation. So I would say, invest in children and those that are bearing children. Because not only will that change our ministry, but it will change you. Because it will keep you young and vital. It will keep you interested and also engaged. Number 4, I think we always need to remember that the amazing teachings of Jesus that we've talked about and we've learned about don't need to go on the shelves. They don't need to be theology. There's a wonderful, I guess you would say, a parable that someone taught to me after worship service this morning and says, do you know what white noise is? Have you ever tried to hear to something and there's something that's kind of buzzing around your ears and you can't really hear it well? This person said, sometimes there's so much white noise with all the theology that we cannot see or hear the beautiful tones of Jesus' love. Is that right? You say, I don't agree with your theology about the premillennialism thought. And are you post-millennium or premillennial? And I said, do you believe in the love of Jesus Christ? And I said, yes. Ta-da! Sometimes we get so caught up in our theology and dogma and doctrine that we miss the tone of God's love for us. That's basically the beautiful message, is it not? So, when we look at a church, I think the true markers of a Jesus-inspired community of faith are these. A welcoming church to everybody, anybody, is that right? And one that is inclusive and forgiving and healing. Someone is hurting out there, we need to heal them and help them find that healing here. This needs to be a spiritual hospital, right? I think it needs to be service-oriented, not only for inside, but mostly for outside. Yes? And it needs to be truth-telling. That means even for those inside, we need to tell the truth to each other. We need to be peace-motivated. And we also need to be justice-seeking and filled with this whole passion for loving the whole world. Yes. I think if we continue in these attributes, we will become a vital, heart-beating community of faith, right? If we're worried about the carpet or the dry rot on our walls, if we're always concerned about, well, I don't like that particular ice cream that you're selling in the park, we run into so many details that God is missed with a heartbeat of love. 6, I think it's very important for us to realize that God is a mystery. And just because I have 2 degrees in theology and I've just been affirmed by the 4th denomination, I don't know much more than you do about God. I don't. The biggest mystery in this whole world is about God. And I hate to say this, but no denomination can actually box God in, can they? No. If you think a denomination has a special key on knowing what God thinks and does, you need to think again. And if you think that you know the will of God, then I think that you need to go back to Humble Class 202. We need to respect each other as we discover God's mystery within our lives. Do we not? I shouldn't say this in front of especially the district superintendent's administrative assistant. But just because they didn't ordain me, they made me a full elder, I'm no more spiritual now than I was before, am I? And you're just as much ordained in God's ministry as I am. Is that right? Well, there are 3 that believe that. Number 7, I want you to completely, all the time, defend, nurture, and speak out for the widows and the orphans and the poor and those that are ill. That includes everybody that is either mentally or physically handicapped, the imprisoned, the despised, and the victimized. And we need to eat with them. Why? Because Jesus did. It doesn't take more, oh, I see that you're hurting. Here's a buck or 2. No, it's, oh, I see you're hurting. Let me have lunch with you. I'll pay for it. I'd like to know more about you. Is that right? I think that when we look at the verse that says pure religion is and undefiled is this. When you go to services at Christ Church every Sunday and you mark your name off. No, that's not pure religion and undefiled. It says, visit the widows and the orphans in their distress and keep yourself undefiled from the world. Is that right? We need to visit the people that are hurting. I think that's what we're called to do as ministers. You said, well, I'm not a minister. I don't even have an ordination certificate. I'll give you mine. As we look out, we need to be opening ourselves not only to each other, but we need to open up our hearts and minds to how God's Spirit wants to motivate and move us to the impossible. What is the impossible? The impossible is by this time next year I come and visit and there are 150 people in these pews. Or I hear about someone saying, we need to feed 300 people a week. It's doing the impossible that you say, we can never do that. No, you can't. But together with God, you can do the impossible, can you not? And my teachings and my example will come to naught unless we allow God's Spirit to not only motivate us, but to tell us that's impossible for anybody but God and you. That's why I feel that to be inspirations to this community, we've got to get to know them. Right? We've got to know their needs. We've got to know where they come from. We've got to actually love them. It's the love of God that transforms lives. It's not my life. It's not your life. It's what God does as you show the love and sacred love of God to this world. Number 9. There's only 10, so you can make it through, I think. Love and don't judge. I had no idea that Presbyterians and Methodists went to heaven 10 years ago. I had no idea I'd have to be singing with them. I actually opened myself up to some wonderful hymns that I didn't even know. Love and don't judge. Because love is a remarkable transforming power. Is it not? And in the end, isn't that the only thing that really matters is if you loved? I was given the historical questions that I was supposed to answer. One of those was that I would never be late, that I would always, on all waking hours, would do ministry, whether waking or sleeping. I thought, how did I do that in sleeping? Well, I'm snoring. And that I would never be unemployed. How do you tell someone that you're never going to be unemployed? There are a lot of these questions I had to say by the grace of God because I don't know how I'm going to handle that. But I think it's very important for us to realize that above all of these historical questions that we say, No matter what happens, I am loved and I will love with holy love. I think it's very important for you to know that you have made an immense change in my life. You've seen me grow, as I've said before, and it's all because of your faith and your support and your prayers. When I first came, I know that some of you said, please help that guy preach better. And see, it's a miracle. You have allowed God within this room and within your hearts more than I could ever even imagine. And I just ask that you allow God to continually open your hearts and your minds, that you open your eyes to see possibilities in front of your face, that you open up your hearts to actually allow things within your heart that you would never have thought possible. And yes, I have not said this in 6 years, but that you open your pocketbooks, not especially, even though it would be helpful, to our offering, but to the needs of our community on a personal basis, to the needs of the world, to the people that are going through hurting times. And that you try to dissolve all the biases within your heart to realize that every person you meet has an image of God that you can learn from. Is that right? Are we all made in the image of God? Have we all seen all aspects and facets of God? No. And there's something that you can learn about God even from the unbeliever, even from the most hated person. I think if we allow God to transform our lives and transform this church, this world will be transformed in a way that you didn't even think possible. You are my miracle for the last 6 years and will remain here. I have something I want to give you because I heard this and I wanted to sing it. So I've asked if she would, if Miss Emily would help me with this. So, I'll just use this, that's all right. I'm already mic'd. So, take it slow and sure. It's not how long we held each other's hand. What matters is how well we've loved each other. It's not how far we've traveled on our way, but what we've found to say. It's not the springs we've seen, but all the shades of green. It's not how long I've held you in my heart. What matters is how sweet the years together. It's not how many summer times we had to give to fall. The early morning smiles we wistfully recall. What matters most is that we loved at all. It's not how many summer times times we had to give to fall, the laughter and the tears we gratefully recall. What matters most is that we loved at all.